values first, audit time, life boundaries, uplifting others, experiencing conflict, and sustaining values. This framework has changed lives. I know it has changed mine. Now it is up to you to take action on what matters most. Welcome to You Belong in the C-Suite podcast. You are ambitious in life and in your career, but something is missing. You want to bring more of your passion to what you do. Because let's be honest, you pour a ton into your work, and it needs to mean more. I'm your host, Laura Eigel. I'm a mom, wife, PhD, coach, advocate, introvert, and indoor rowing fanatic. I'm passionate about living a life that's in line with my values. We'll give you the actionable tips and tools you need to lead with your values, make a difference, and have career success. The world needs more diversity and authenticity in the top jobs at organizations. Your leadership belongs there. You belong in the C-Suite. Hi there, friends. I am thrilled to announce that I've written my first book. It's called Values First: How Knowing Your Core Beliefs Can Get You the Life and Career You Want. I have poured my heart into this book with personal stories and stories from coaching clients using the Values First framework. Between the constant pressure of job performance and demands on your time, it's easy to lose sight of your values, letting them shift out of alignment. Those simple misalignments are keeping you from feeling joyful and fulfilled. Learn how to recenter your life and career around what truly matters to you in Values First. I am so happy that Values First: How Knowing Your Core Beliefs Can Get You the Life and Career You Want is out in the world. I want to make sure that you are the first to know about every book launch activity that we have in store and every online and in-person book launch celebration. So stay up to date by joining our list at thecatchgroup.com/valuesfirst. That's thecatchgroup.com/valuesfirst. Welcome to this week's episode of the You Belong in the C-Suite podcast. I am so happy that Values First: How Knowing Your Core Beliefs Can Get You the Life and Career You Want is out in the world. And today I'm going to give you a deeper dive into the Values First framework, the framework that I've used myself and the framework that I coach high-achieving leaders to live a life of their values and to lead authentically. Let's get started. First, I am so happy that we are here talking about the book and it is finally out. Now comes the real mission: to get it into the hands of listeners and readers, to get people to take action. Why? Because I know that this framework works. And it isn't one of those that are a one and done kind of thing. It's a framework that you can tangibly use to become more fulfilled, make the small or big decisions, and it's a framework that you won't grow out of. But before I go into the specifics of the framework, I wanted to spend the time thanking the team that is behind this book. Since we launched April 12th, we've made it to Amazon #1 bestseller in multiple categories. But this has been a labor of love, and not only for me, but for many people behind the scenes. First and foremost, my book coach, Lauren Marie Fleming, and the Wife Book community, thank you so much. To my podcast manager, Samantha Oliveras, you were instrumental in our launch. Thank you. You are amazing. And to my virtual assistant team at Joyfully Organized, you are all so great at what you do. Thank you to Sarah, Beth, and Liz. And to my publisher at Houndstooth Press and Scribe Media, Katie, my project manager, is amazing. And Javon McCormick, you are running an amazing company. To Amanda Wild from Wild S, the graphic designer who did my branding and designed the workbook. It is beautifully made and it will help people take action because it is so well designed. And to Amy Herforth for photography and branding pictures. She's been taking pictures of our family for over 15 years. And so I'm just so happy that she's been along in this journey as well. There is a lot that happens behind the scenes when launching a book. So thank you to everyone who helped get this book out into the world. So today I'm going to dig into the Values First framework a bit more. The model itself at its core is simple because it grounds you in your values. At every step, your values are considered because that's what's most important to you. So who is this framework for? It's for everyone. You don't have to be a leader at a big company. You can still be in school or just starting your career. Or you can be a seasoned executive already in the C-suite or running your own company. It's a framework that meets you where you are. And the framework can be easily remembered because it is an acronym and it spells out the word values. The V stands for values first. The A stands for audit time. The L is for life boundaries. The U is for uplifting others. The E is for experiencing conflict. And the S stands for sustaining values. I've been using a version of this framework for multiple years as I've been coaching leaders. At the time, it wasn't called the Values First framework, but it essentially had the same steps in it, just named differently. Through the book writing process, I did name it Values First and came up with different step names. And while we were editing the book, Lauren and I, we built the acronym around it. So it had been named the Values First framework, but Lauren and I had this very circular conversation one day about naming the steps of the framework. And we wanted it to start with a baseline of your values or clarity of values. And we went around and around with it until Lauren just looked at me and then at this flip chart and said, "Oh my goodness, what about this?" And for the step one, she simply wrote out values first because that's what we start with. And that's the name of the framework. So obviously it has to be values first. And that is a moment we still laugh about. So yes, the V stands for values first, because that's where I always want you to start, with your values. In the first part of the framework, you dig into what matters most to you to set that foundation of your core values. In episode 1 of this podcast, I talk about how to find clarity in your values by answering a few open-ended prompts and then identifying themes, which will lead you towards 5 to 7 values. In the free Values First workbook, you can download that worksheet. And then you identified what living your values means to you in the I'm Living My Values 1 worksheet. And I love both of these exercises as the kind of foundation of this framework because you get clarity on what's most important to you and you define it for yourself. What one person defines as success for a value of impact could be very different for another person's definition of that same value. The next stage of the Values First framework is very eye-opening. It's called audit time. There are exercises within this stage of the framework to see how you're spending your time, and then you overlay your values on top of that. So where are your values showing up? Where are they not? Which ones are most important to you right now? Lots of insights can be gained here. Some opportunities for growth and some opportunities to celebrate where you are already living your values day in and day out. The next part of the Values First framework is life boundaries. Here I teach you a 3-step process to build a boundary. Think of your boundaries as a hug that you put around your values. You're wrapping up those values and you're protecting them. You're nurturing them. You're doing that by setting boundaries, keeping them, and celebrating them. Through the book and through the Values First workbook, I teach you how to build a boundary by tying it to a value, building a system around it, and then celebrating your success. This is where it may feel tough or even unattainable in some days. You'll have so many objections to putting that boundary in place. But I'll tell you, most of these are internal objections, and you may be keeping yourself from the things you really need, no one else. In the book, I talk about how to outsmart those internal and external objections and tips and tools to build and keep your boundaries, even when it's uncomfortable or hard to enforce. Listen to episode 3 of this podcast called Burnout and Boundaries for more examples. The next step of the Values First framework is uplifting others. When you start building your boundaries and living your values, others will start to take notice. They'll see the behavior change. If you're leading a team, then they will see you model that behavior. And in the book, I talk about the importance of peers, both to motivate you, but also to keep you accountable. I talk about the importance of having a close group of peers. I call it your catch crew. Who is in your catch crew? You know, the people you go to first when you want to celebrate an awesome work presentation, or your work BFF that you complain about your boss to. In episode 29 of this podcast called Peer Accountability for Growth, you can learn more about why peers are so important. The other part about uplifting others is very actionable. And it's building a culture based on your values. That can be a very tactical thing like building a rewards and recognition program to celebrate team successes, or it could be more aspirational and motivational. But you're doing the work here to show up leading with your values, and that will motivate others to do the same. Within the Values First workbook, there are multiple exercises here to use with your team to co-create the culture you want to build together. The next part of the Values First framework is experiencing conflict, and conflict will inevitably come. It's not if, but when. It may be a conflict or tension between two of your existing values. It may be when your values aren't being met, or if your values are in conflict with the company that you work for. It could be after a tough situation of not upholding your boundaries. Whatever the conflict, you can go back to your values first. Center back in your values. Use those to understand what is contributing to the conflict. If it's a conflict due to boundaries, you can use different exercises like the red flags and traps worksheet in your Values First workbook. Or you might need to do an action review using a high-low exercise. In the book, I equip you with the tools you need to be prepared for conflict when it comes up and learn from it so that you can get better in the future. So you know that I'm not a one and done kind of person. I'm a continuous learner. And remember, some of my values are growth and development. So I built the framework with sustainability in mind. The last step of the process is called sustaining values. I teach you how to live your values for the long haul, and that means over time. The tools are meant to be used multiple times. So your values might change over time. They're going to evolve. One value might be more important in one season of life than in another. What success means for one value could change over time too. So I've built out an action plan for you here that you can use regularly to check in with your values and do that with your catch crew, to learn from each other, to be held accountable to each other, and to build the practice of self-reflection. And that is the Values First framework. Values first, audit time, life boundaries, uplifting others, experiencing conflict, and sustaining values. This framework has changed lives. I know it has changed mine. Now it is up to you to take action on what matters most. I'd love for you to buy the Values First book, but even more, I want you to use the tools in the free Values First workbook. I want you to lead with your values, and I want you to give others permission to do the same. If you haven't downloaded it yet, go to thecatchgroup.com/valuesfirst to grab your free Values First workbook and take action towards that next step of living a life of your values. Remember, your leadership belongs here. You belong in the C-suite. I want to thank you so much for listening to the You Belong in the C-Suite podcast. If you are enjoying this content, please remember to rate and review on Apple Podcasts. By leaving a review, you are helping others find this content. We will be featuring 5-star reviews on air in upcoming episodes. Editing and support for the podcast is done by S&E Podcast Management. To get more tips and tools to help you live a life guided by your values, go to thecatchgroup.com. Keep your boundaries and take care.